Hello everyone, welcome to From Combat Boots to Business Suits, the podcast brought to you by the Officers Association Scotland. My name is Jane Burns, I'm your host, and today I am joined by the lovely Mr. Antony McCord. Welcome.
Hello.
It's such a pleasure to have you here today. Thank you for your quite long travel this morning. Where have you come from today?
I've come all the way down from Murray.
And a nice relaxing train journey?
A lovely relaxing train journey.
With, I heard, some homemade banana bread?
Yes, homemade banana bread taken out of the freezer last night and a nice British Rail cup of tea.
Oh, lovely. Actually, do you know, having small children, the thought nowadays of having like a 3-hour train journey to just do nothing, it just sounds bliss.
I recommend it.
Next time we record an episode, I'll come up to you. So, Anthony, when we were putting together the broader idea for this series, this first series of the podcast, I've been spending quite a lot of time interviewing people that work in specific sectors. I've done an episode with a hiring manager about their perspective of what they're looking for on the other side of the desk, that sort of thing. But last year, you sent us over a document that you had written entitled 12 Lessons What I Have Learnt After 7 Months Looking for a Job. And all of these insights that you'd put together, first, initially, when we read them at the OAS, we thought, those will really resonate with our clients. And actually, when I knew that you were going to come and do this podcast episode, I sat at the kitchen table and I read these to my husband, he's ex-artillery. And every single one of your points resonated with his experience of job hunting post-resettlement. Yes. So we just thought, we've got to get you in and we've got to talk about this. So I'm really excited about this one. But before we get into it, I think it'd be great for our listeners and our viewers to just hear a brief overview of your career in the military, why you signed up, all the bits in between, and then why you decided to sign off and join us over here on the dark side in civilian life.
First, thank you very much for inviting me down. Yeah. Yes, it was an early morning start, but definitely worth it. I joined the Air Force when I was 20 on a 5-year commission. And they were going to pay my last year at, I was at Dundee, they were going to pay my last year of education. And after 5 years, I enjoyed it. And my mantra was, I'll keep on doing this until I stop enjoying it. And I trained as an administrative officer because I couldn't be a pilot or a navigator because I wore glasses. But I wanted to be in the Air Force, and I have done a whole host of different jobs over the years. I've lived in Norway. I've spent 2 years living in the Falkland Islands. I've spent a number of years in Belgium working for NATO in different guises. But my last job was as the air attaché in Paris, which was so much fun. And the reason I left, it's got nothing to do with me. I just had too many birthdays and I just ran out of time. So I retired. I came back from Paris just over about 2 years ago, and they stopped paying me about 18 months ago. Yeah. And that's where I am now.
Mm-hmm. Well, listen, so you've done a full career. Would you, just a little sidebar, would you have carried on? If it had been an option.
There were a couple of jobs I had my eye on, and I thought, if they offer that to me, I would take them.
Yeah.
But interestingly, I don't regret leaving.
No. Okay, well that's good. We'll come back to that then, actually. So you retired.
Yep.
Suddenly you've got the prospect of a civilian life, a civilian career ahead. What was the motivation for looking for a next job? Could you have retired and just gone, you know what, that's me in the working world, or was it, do you know what, I still need to earn a wage? Or was it just a case of I'm just not ready to stop working yet?
I think it's the latter. I'm not ready to stop working yet. Mm-hmm. But what I did do before I left, I sat down with my wife, and I said, I think I need to do 3 things when I leave. First one is I wanted to get into sort of charity work, but real sort of absolutely hands-on charity work, which I've managed to do, which is really satisfying. The second piece was this is linked to one of our plans, was we were going to go home to Murray and settle there.
Yeah.
I wasn't going. we've done enough moving. It's nice to move into our own house and know that, when you plant the bulbs, you're going to see them come up. So we said, well, we'll settle in Murray.
Yeah.
So I said, I need to do something that is linked to the community, and I managed to find something to do that achieves that aim. And the final point, and you referred to it just now, was I need to go and find something that I would enjoy doing that earned me some money.
Yeah.
I call myself a veteran. My wife says I'm unemployed.
Brilliant. Okay. Well, so you, the veteran, I'll refer to you as the
Thank you.
veteran, just for the sake of keeping the peace in this conversation. Okay, so you've settled down in Murray. I can imagine as well for your wife that was really nice to feel like you're putting down some roots.
Yeah, she enjoyed. She's ex-Foreign Office, so she enjoyed the moving around. She enjoyed all the sort of the various challenges that we had. But we had served in Murray. I had served in Murray about 15, 16 years ago. My wife comes from that area, so it was roots. You're absolutely right, and it was a case of right now. It's going to be so different, but it's on our terms.
Yes.
So we moved back into a house we had never lived in. Can you move back into it? No, we moved into a house that we had never lived in. We'd owned it for a number of years and rented it out, and that was really nice. It was nice to get back into the community, sort of look up old friends, sort of spend more time with family. So all of that is, was positive.
Yes.
But I still needed to go and find a job.
The job. So how did you approach resettlement then, in the sense of, after doing such a long career, presumably you hadn't had to apply for a job really ever.
Not really, no. Even sort of to be an attaché in the Air Force, you have to sort of put yourself forward, and they sift you, and they sort of discuss your suitability. Generally, on your ability to actually learn languages is one of the criteria.
Okay.
So I hadn't. And I thought, okay, how am I going to do this? And so a lot of that was, well, what's out there? I had made a criteria of, these are the sort of organisations I wanted to work for.
Okay, so you'd already done that kind of pinpointed.
I saw these are the organisations, and this is the geography. And geography was really important because we said, would I weekend commute? Only if the job was really, really good.
Yeah.
Would we relocate? Not really, but so we had created boundaries and restrictions.
That's sensible.
And yes, I was being picky.
Yeah.
I was look at a job and I look at it and you see the advert, and my wife said, "Well, you could do that." I said, "Yes, but it says this, and I don't want to do that."
Yeah.
Or it's in this location, and I don't want to go there. So I was being picky. And I had a conversation with someone the other week, and he said, "Well, if you went down to Edinburgh or even sort of further afield, you would find jobs, but I don't want to."
Don't want to, yeah. So you were already starting. So first of all, you're up in Murray.
Yeah.
You've set a geographical sort of limit, which was something that we always recommend at the OAS that you do as well. Some people are quite willing to go and travel, but you need to know how long your commute's going to be. These are all really important factors. And you'd kind of highlighted, you mentioned organisations, but had you pinned down any specific sectors that you were interested in particularly?
Yes, I did. I sort of said, I want to do something useful, make use of and I'm not sure whether they're transferable or translatable, but my skills and my experience, and put that into something that, for good. So I was looking at the NHS, I was looking at sort of third sector, I was looking at local government, a bit of sort of national government as well. So those were the areas initially I was looking at. Interestingly, I did broaden that out a wee bit and looked at academia as well.
Okay. And so to initially sort of pinpoint jobs and start to apply, were you drawing on your network to try and get some insights into those particular sectors? Or if you saw a job that you quite fancied, were you kind of going on LinkedIn and going, do I know anyone that kind of can help me out here or anything? Were you drawing on a network to help you?
Absolutely. And networking was a lot of research as what was coming up. And some of that was just reading the newspaper and saying, "Oh, look, this organisation's just got a big, been given a big grant by the government. They might be recruiting."
Yes, yeah.
I had a conversation with a hospital manager the other day who said, "We haven't got any money. We're not going to be recruiting."
Yeah.
So you know that you can put that onto the back burner.
Yeah.
And everybody I contacted was happy to help. And sometimes it was, opening a door or signposting you to another door.
Yeah.
And I was really surprised how friendly and professional people were. If you went and said, "I want to know about your organisation or the sector you're in. Can you? I'll buy you a cup of coffee,
Yeah.
or we'll do it over Teams, which is not my favourite method, but we would have a conversation." And it was really interesting how people were friendly and were happy to help, even if it was just a name for the next person.
Absolutely. Do you know, it's something that has been across the board universal in every conversation I've had with all of the veterans that have done episodes for this podcast. People are just so willing to help. They want to help, and it's actually, as someone I'm not military myself, it's really heartwarming to know that, and I've seen it as well with my husband. He's reached out to people throughout his resettlement journey, and everyone, and then also that kind of pay it back.
Absolutely.
As well, wanting to do the same for others.
And I sort of noticed it the other day. Someone sort of contacted me, and I thought, well, someone was good to me. I feel morally obliged, but it's not even an obligation. You want to do it.
So what I'm kind of hearing is you've kind of done everything kind of right. So you've kind of drawn on your network. You've set parameters and boundaries that are going to work for you and your wife and the civilian life that you want to have. You have looked at specific organisations. So really, you've checked so many of those boxes of things that we would recommend that you do. And so this is where we're going to get into the grit of the conversation. So fast forward 7 months.
Yes.
And you haven't been able to secure a job. How many interviews had you done in those 7 months?
I think I'd probably done 7 or 8.
7 or 8 interviews. So we know as well, and our listeners and our clients know how difficult it is to secure an interview in the first place. Even, we talk loads about getting through ATS systems and getting your CV in front of a hiring manager to even be called in to interview. So in those 7 months, you'd managed to secure 7 to 8 interviews, which is a huge achievement in and of itself. So there's something going right with your CV. You're getting in the door. But of course, the reason why this document has come into existence is that you hadn't managed to secure any of those jobs. So do you want to just give me just very, very briefly where you were at? This was written, for context, this was written last June,
yes.
Correct? So where were you at sort of emotionally at the time when you wrote this?
I had just done an interview in late May, and I had, took the interview was on a Friday afternoon, and they phoned me at sort of lunchtime on the Monday saying, "No, you haven't got it," and they said certain things, and we'll come back to that. Such to the point where I was going, not overly happy with that decision, but I'm going to have to live with it. And then I sat down and said, right, what have I learnt? I've now been doing this for 7 months or whatever, 8 months. What have I learnt? And I thought, I've just got to sit down and I wrote this for me.
Yeah.
It was I need to sit down and work out what I've learnt, and then look at whether I can learn from those points to be better when the next interview comes along. So I sat down and sort of got my pen out and wrote a whole bunch of points and then played with them, and I got 12.
Yeah.
And then I looked at them and realised that you could split them into 3 parts. And I wrote it up and put it away. And I was talking to a friend of mine about this, and I said, I wrote it. And he said, send me a copy. And I sent him a copy. He went, yeah, it's kind of how I feel about it.
Yeah.
And then that was the June, July time. OAS came up, I think, for us in August or September time. And I bumped into you. Mentioned the fact that I'd written this thing, and you asked whether I could share it, so I did. But it was written for me.
It was written for you, yeah, exactly. And again, such a positive thing to do of like, I'm going to sit back, I'm going to write this for me, I'm going to self-reflect and see how I can move positively forward. Shall we jump into it?
Let's go.
Let's go into section 1, which is called the search.
And we've touched on it. There are 4 points to this particular thing. We've touched on it already. And the first one is research. You know, the idea that you really look at the sector, the company, what's going on, understand the economics of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because if you've really got to get into that, and try and use LinkedIn. Do some LinkedIn stalking, because you'll learn about people, and you might learn about the fact that one of them is has unbeknown to you had been in the army or the air force or the navy, and you could maybe refer to that. So that research piece is really important, and we've also mentioned the networking piece. Network. Use LinkedIn. Use your friends. Use your contacts. I was going back into Murray after being away for 15, 16 years, and I looked people up. They'd moved on, but they were working in the sector, and I would just go and talk to them.
Yeah.
The interesting piece is, I use the term, the strength of weak connections. It's not necessarily the person that you meet first.
Mm-hmm.
It's the person that they put you onto.
Yes.
That gives you the information you want. I went for one job. I spoke to someone in that particular sector, and they knew nothing about that particular job, but they knew a person who did. And I then ended up talking to this person who was an absolute gold mine on just the sector, the job itself, and actually some of the gossip round the job, because everybody knew everybody.
Yeah.
So she was very good and just gave me a few hints and tips, and that was absolute gold dust. So when we sort of you do those 2 bits and pieces, and you work it through such that you can you prepare yourself as best you can.
Yes.
The other thing I kind of learned putting the search was you might be good, but luck and timing has an awful lot to do with it.
Yeah.
You should have been here last week
Yes.
when we were doing it, and you go, oof. So, and you just have to live with that, accept it. And sometimes luck comes around again.
Yeah.
And you're prepared, and you think, actually, this job has come up again, or this job has come up again. I've done all the research. I've got all my connections and my networks, and I'm just going to do it again. But so
nothing's a waste of time.
Nothing
really.
is a waste of time. And the piece I learned in the search sector, the last piece, is the HR department is a window into that organisation. There are some organisations who, in the recruitment process, are so slick, so organised, so prepared for you that you don't have to do any of the sort of administrative thinking because they've done it before. Others, you go, crikey, if that's the HR department, what's the rest of it like?
Yes, yeah.
And it is an interesting sort of measurement.
Yeah.
Other times, it's not an HR department that's doing the recruiting. It's the actual the person you want to go and work for. But it was interesting. You looking at how HR departments work. So those were that was kind of the search piece of that.
All right. So that's the search piece, and certainly when we look at your success of application to interview, the search really hasn't been an issue for you, and these points have really clearly worked. So this is all brilliant advice of getting yourself prepared and in the door.
Yeah.
So section 2, the interview. Now this is interesting. This is very interesting.
The interview. I think anybody who likes interviews must be slightly strange, but I kind of took away 4 points. The first one, Teams is a dreadful way of being interviewed. You're in front of your own screen. You can't see any of the sort of the non-visual cues. You can see sometimes the people who are interviewing are in different rooms. Sometimes they're in the same place, and you're just at the end of the line. It's a bit false. It's not brilliant. There is one advantage though. You can put all your notes on post-it stickers around the edge of the screen, and as long as your eyes don't move too far, practice that. You don't have to worry too much about remembering stuff, and you can then bring other bits and pieces in.
Can I just on the teams, just before we move away or move on to the next point, do you have any particular, just from your own experiences, and without obviously getting into the nitty-gritty of what job and who it was, but just do you have any particular examples of Teams interviews that you felt have been really, the fact that it was even on Teams almost meant that it was kind of stacked not in your favour?
Yeah, sort of I got an email from one organisation, seeing you're so far away, we'll do this on Teams. And I then came on screen, saw the interviewing panel, and it was obvious that the person who was coming behind me was going to go and sit in the empty chair that was in front of me.
Okay.
So, and is that a level playing field? Not sure it is.
Yes.
But it was the playing field I was prepared to accept. Teams is not brilliant.
No.
Though there is another piece of advice that is, if you're going to wear a suit, wear the whole suit, including because it means you're dressing up for it. You know, if you're just I'll just wear my suit jacket, and my tie, and my shirt, and I'll have my Bermudas and my flip flops underneath. You're not giving it your all.
Yeah.
Wear the whole
suit.
The whole suit, and as soon as that camera goes on, it's like going through a room.
Yeah.
So yeah, that one I learned pretty quickly that was, I kind of learned that one beforehand. I sort of accepted that was the case, and it does dress up as if you were going to be there in person. Yeah. The chances of you being asked to stand up and walk away and you're wearing
but also I think I've heard stories as well of people who, and I agree. I think you should always be sat present yourself as you would in person, 100%, because it just puts you in that mind, that headspace, doesn't it? And I have heard some stories from people who have turned up in a suit dressed for an interview, and maybe the person interviewing them is also working from home that day and dressed very casually for their own interview, which can be a little bit off-putting or jarring slightly.
It is, I think military folk will make an effort.
Absolutely.
And you look at some of the people interviewing and you go, and it goes back to sort of the values of the organisation. It tells you a little bit more about the organisation. They're informal, great. They are wearing Bermudas and a t-shirt. Well, maybe not. It's up to you. You make that decision, but it allows you to see it. But if you know that the organisation or think that the sector you're interviewing for likes a bit of formality, go the whole hog.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So I really like that point, because Teams, it's the way of the working world now. Basically everyone is going to do a Teams interview at some point, and I think just what I really enjoyed about you, even just the statement, Teams is not a good way to interview, is that it's okay and it's valid to feel that actually I don't like being interviewed this way. There's just a way of having to accept that it's going to happen. It's not probably going to feel like the best interview experience of your life, but there's ways of, as you say, getting yourself presentable, having a little bit of advantage of being able to have some notes around and that sort of thing. So it's being able to kind of draw on that and make the most of the experience.
You can play it to your advantage.
Yeah, but it's also perfectly fine to come off a Teams interview and go, I would have really preferred that not to have happened.
Absolutely.
Okay, so number 6.
So a lot of interviews are formulaic, especially if you're working for sort of the public sector, and that can be a little disconcerting. You answer the question, and there's lots of scribbling amongst the panel. You can work it to your favour, because with a little bit of research, you can work out what questions they have to ask, and so forth. You can prepare for them, and if they also like you to deliver them in a particular format, the formulaic piece. Just learn what the what they're looking for. I think STAR is one of the formulas they like, and just learn. Make sure that all your answers follow that. You'll hear a lot more scribbling, which is good. But it is a bit formulaic can be a bit sort of disconcerting because they spend more time sort of trying to fill in boxes than actually listening to what you're actually saying.
It's one of these things. It means that you don't feel particularly like you're having a conversation as such, but you just need to kind of be confident in the fact that you are giving them what they want, because when especially for those organisations that do have tick boxes of markers that you have to hit, well then you're just playing the game and doing exactly what they need to do.
The disadvantage is you can't have the eye contact and the like. You just play it, especially if you have an understanding of the sort of questions they're going to ask and the order that they're going to come and bring it up.
And I like what you just said about the eye contact there, about not letting that spook you too much, because it is, I mean, that does feel very unnatural if people have really got their heads down and they're kind of just like scribbling and whatever. But just kind of keep going and stick with it. And actually on the STAR method, and I think for a lot of organisations, I think I'm right in saying that you can on Glassdoor quite often find
the sort of questions
that are going to come up.
And it goes back to that research piece.
Absolutely. Number 7, I like this.
Is this the nervous one?
No, this is.
No, this is the one. Oh, interviewers can be dreadful. Yes, remember they don't have much practice at it.
Yeah, absolutely.
There are some folk who, you've probably done more interviews than they've done interviewing.
Yes,
And some of them can be, sort of all over the place, notes all over the place. It's the opposite to the formulaic piece, especially if they haven't got a member of the HR to sort of guide them in the way that they want to do it. Again, you can actually make that you can play that to your advantage, because you can say, well, you can introduce your ideas as they try and get themselves sorted out. You have to be careful about that and read the room.
Sure.
But I have been interviewed by 2 people who they were obvious that they hadn't done it very often.
Yeah.
And that's fine. So so you've got 3 nervous people in the room.
I was just going to say that. I mean, that's a very human thing, as well as that. There's a lot of pressure when you have to interview someone. I was pulled in once in a previous job. I was on the day asked, could you sit in on this interview and think of 2 questions? And I was absolutely bricking it, because I thought, this person's, there was 2 candidates, and I was like, whether or not they're going to get this job, part of that lies on my shoulders. So I think that's actually a really good thing to acknowledge, is that actually the person interviewing you may well be almost as nervous as you are, because you're right, they probably maybe don't come from HR, or they themselves, depending on the job and the sector, they might not be particularly confident themselves in terms of speaking and all of that sort of thing, and suddenly they're having to put together this rather contrived situation in a way that's going to benefit you and benefit the organisation. And so, it's a lot of pressure. Yeah,
it is.
To be an interviewer.
And you, as long as you understand that, and some are much better than others, but that's always going to be the case. Which then leads me on to my final point on this, and we talk nervous. You should be nervous. It's good for you. A little bit of sort of positive stress is good. And my first ever interview, I was probably more than just nervous. So I think the recommendation I would give, and I stole that from someone else, is it goes back to sort of making sure that as you walk through the room or switch on the mic, you're going to be the best that you are at that time, and just go for it. And it's it's like an actor walking onto a stage, and so with that piece of advice, I've used that. I've sat there, and they say they call you up, and you stand up, and I will do my button up and walk through, and then, well, that's it. They're going to get me, as I am, but accept the fact nervous is probably good. It keeps you on your toes. And so if you're sort of being I'm sort of laid back about it, you might miss something. So nervous is not a bad place to be.
No, I love when you mentioned about the analogy of an actor, because that's obviously the entertainment industry. That's my background, and one of the things, I've done a lot of auditions in my life. So many I couldn't even tell you. And one of the best pieces of advice I was ever given by a casting director, which is obviously the equivalent in this scenario to a hiring manager, is that we want you to be good. We want you to walk into the audition room and to be able to give you the job straight away, because it makes everything easier for us. We don't need to do any more work.
Yeah.
And approaching an interview in that way, despite some of the points that you've made previously of like, actually timing might not be great, and all there might be other factors at play, and we're going to get into that in section 3 as well. But if you walk in with the mindset of, these people want to give me this job,
Yes.
they want you to be good.
Yeah,
no one wants to waste their time on a bad candidate.
Yeah.
They want you to be the best candidate ever, to go, brilliant, job done, we don't need to do this anymore.
Yeah.
Job's filled. And that's a good
and
space to be in.
and if you've got that mindset, you've just got to be a bit nervous, but be a bit confident.
Yeah, absolutely. So that's the interview section, kind of rounded up. So obviously these insights, they've all came from interviews that you've had. Before we move completely away from it, is there any sort of personal little anecdotes of things that happened to you in interviews that you'd like to share that relate to these points before we move on?
Those points on the interview were hard earned.
Yeah.
And after I wrote them and wrote the piece and sat down and thought about it, as I said, I've done interviews after that, 2 or 3, and they were much easier.
Mm-hmm.
I still was slightly nervous, but I was prepared for it. I understood the formulaic elements depending on where you were, who was doing the interviewing. You got to read the room better, because you were looking at sort of cues from folk. So the none of this is new. But when I sort of packaged, this was for me, when I packaged those 4 bits together for the interview, I went back before I did, I said 2 or 3 after that, and sat down and went, yeah, okay, I can do this.
Yeah.
And it does make sense.
Yes.
And sweat it, but don't sweat it too much.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Okay, great. So section 3.
Okay.
This is the one that we want to get a little bit meaty with.
Yep.
Which is the aftermath, because of course, you did your 7-8 interviews in 7-8 months, and you hadn't actually secured any of the jobs.
No.
So that, I know I asked you when you sat down to write it how you felt, but where were you at? Were you thinking, because obviously you hadn't written this yet, were you thinking, I am unemployable? Is it me? Or did you already have a sense of the job market's maybe a little bit not quite working efficiently? Like, where were you at mentally at that point?
Yeah, there were days or where you stomp around and you drag the dog for a long walk, and have a good rant. And you think, well, is it me? Am I pitching myself incorrectly? Am I going too high, or am I going too low? Or and interestingly, part of the networking piece, I was asking people, should I pitch myself at this level, or should I pitch myself at this level and then do a job for 18 months and then be the internal candidate? And it was 50-50. The advice, pitch at the job that you should be doing. No, just go into the organisation, sort of understand it, and then move up. And the advice was literally straight down the middle. And so I can't tell you what to go for.
No.
You need to get that feel. A person needs to get that feel. So I was, I was getting to the point and going, right, is it me?
Yeah.
Is it me, or is it the fact I was in the military? And part of that process of is it me was writing the piece. The other piece was to go and talk to some friends, and realise it isn't necessarily you, and realise it isn't because you're in the military. In fact, people do like sort of a military background, and I've done a couple of I've worked a headhunter found me, which was really surprising. And we were talking about bits and pieces, and he said, I don't need to go through all of that.
Yeah.
You were in the military. And I thought, crikey, that opened a door.
Yeah.
Now, I got onto the long list. Did I get onto the short list? No. But there was nothing I could do to get onto the short list. I just didn't have the qualification that they suddenly decided they wanted.
Yeah.
So, I don't feel bad about that. So so I did feel bad, for a while, and there is a little bit of introspection. But I found writing this was actually really useful.
Yeah.
Because I said, right, that's it. That's what I'm going to do. And I will move on. But I won't let it get me down. I won't let it consume me. Because you know what the lessons are.
Yes.
Now apply those.
Yeah.
As you said, I was getting interviews. I worked out I had a hit rate of about 50%.
Which is actually quite astonishing.
Because I was
in
being
today's
picky.
Market. Yeah.
I was being picky. I want that job, that job. I don't want that job. I was getting a reasonable hit rate.
Yeah.
I wasn't putting in loads of applications. I was, being very targeted in it.
So that's all clear, and you'd done a lot of self-reflection then, and is it me? You'd gone down that path, but of course now we're going to move into section 3, the aftermath, and the points that you came up with then on reflection, because obviously you'd done a lot of introspective work on yourself, but of course these points, and that's also what I really like about them, is it kind of just highlights things that may not be quite within your control. So there's work that you can do on yourself to become better at interviews and to secure that job. But I think these points are very, very relatable and ring very true to a lot of people. So yeah, let's get into it.
Right. So yes, you're right. A lot of the stuff in sections 1 and 2 is internal to you, and you can play with that the results of that. The aftermath had me right. Where I didn't write it as an aftermath thing. I just wrote a list and then realised those points are sort of kind of the aftermath piece. And I think the first one is the result is sometimes, not often, but sometimes predetermined.
Yeah.
And you are there to make people look good, feel good, and
because they have to conduct interviews.
And they have to conduct interviews, and it looks good if you've got someone from the military, and you're making up numbers. That is, initially you go, really? Surely it's going to be a level playing field. Sadly, no. And I have 2 experiences of where it was obvious on the debrief that whatever I did, I wasn't going to get that job.
Yeah.
And which was a little bit disconcerting. And that kind of leads into the next point. But it was, dust yourself off. Look on the fact that you actually had an interview.
Yeah.
So you got past whatever barriers that they have, but you jumped all of those hurdles, and take the experience.
Yeah.
Now that is easy to say. Now.
Yeah.
In the moments of, I'm sorry you haven't got the job, and then you ask, what can I do better, or why didn't I get the job, and there's no real reason.
Yeah.
Or you think the reason is contrived. It's difficult to take that, just take the experience, but, just take the experience.
Yeah.
And that kind of leads me on to the second point about, the conversation you have with people afterwards, and indeed people as you prepare for it. Folk will be at times less than truthful. They may not tell you the whole truth. They may tell you something that they think you want to hear, rather than what you actually need to hear. And I distilled that in rather bluntly into people lie.
Yeah.
And it is blunt. It's not necessarily polite, but that's how I felt when I wrote it. But people, they probably don't want to hurt your feelings. They
Is this when you've asked for feedback?
When
for
you've heard
example,
feedback, and one of them was nothing. What do you mean nothing?
Yeah.
You did nothing wrong. So why didn't I get the job?
Yeah.
And so and then you get something which is a little bit sort of contrived. But again, accept the fact that some people are rather good at sort of giving you feedback that is good. Some people are going to give you feedback that isn't very good.
Mm-hmm.
Some people are going to just, basically just try and fob you off. Accept it.
This also kind of harkens back to one of the earlier points as well about that not everyone is a good interviewer.
Yeah.
So when it comes to giving that sort of feedback, not everyone's going to be very well equipped to give that feedback in a way that is constructive and actually helpful to the person who's still looking for a job.
Yeah. The bit of advice I would do, and one organisation sort of introduced it to me, and I think it's really good. Phoned up, told me I didn't get the job, and said, "You will be disappointed. However, I'm not going to give you feedback now. Talk to my secretary, PA, team, and arrange a time when you and I can. You've thought about it, and you and I can then have a conversation, which is feedback." And that worked. Well, that was probably the best feedback I ever got.
Yeah, that's
because
great.
you were responding to the comments. You weren't reacting to the comments, because you are disappointed. If you've done your research, you've done all the work, you've done the interview, you thought the interview went well, and then to be told you didn't get the job, you will be feeling a little bit sore.
Yeah.
So that piece of it, that style of doing it, saying, "Look, I'm sorry you didn't get the job. We'll give you feedback at a later date." I've had that once, and the two organisations who did it to me, one was an email, one was a phone call. But they then said, "Look, don't think about it. We'll have a conversation when the dust is settled."
Yeah.
And that was probably the best piece of advice on that. So yes, people may be, for whatever reason, less than truthful, but just accept that, take the experience, and then move it on. The other aftermath piece, the sort of penultimate one, is, and this came from a headhunter, which is you've got to kiss an awful lot of frogs, and those were her words, and she's right, and that goes back to picking your jobs, knowing your sector, knowing what you want to do. But we spoke about timing and luck and the like, and also the piece of some of this is predetermined.
Yep.
Not all of it.
No.
No. I'm not saying, but sometimes you go and go, I was never going to do that. So there is that element of accept the fact you've got to do this more than once. Lucky is the person who only has to do one interview and then gets the job that they want. It is you're less likely to be that. More likely you've got to go out and find some other pieces.
And I think as well, sorry, just to touch on that, it's quite interesting. It's an important point to make within the context of this podcast and the clientele that we're speaking to. Those ex-military, is that this isn't something that is exclusive to ex-military candidates. Everyone in the job market goes through this, and actually, on average, people will interview 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's people out there that interview 20 times before they get a job. That's not something that's stacked against you because you're military. That's a universal fact of the job market.
That's just the market.
2025.
Yeah. and you take the positive point that you've made it to interview.
Yeah.
That's the piece where you can shine. It's not your ability to write or your ability to get past the various barriers and hurdles that people will put up. It's for you to shine, whether you do that on Teams or whether you do it face to face.
Yes.
It's for you to shine, and you may just have shone really well, but you just didn't, for whatever reason, hit the vibes with the interviewing panel.
Yeah.
So just reflect on that. Don't take it personally, and move on. And that's why you've got to have accept the fact that you've got to do this more than once.
Yeah.
And accept the fact that you've got lots on. And that led me, that sort of reflection led me to my last point, which was have a plan B, have a plan C, have a plan D.
I love it.
Because you can, if I wanted to be, an astronaut, and all you wanted to be, you're going to get mighty disappointed when they say, sorry, you've got glasses, you can't be an astronaut.
Yes.
So be flexible. Take one of the goes back to almost the sort of the second point, which is the network. Take out what your network is coming out. You may find outliers. I was asked to put my my CV in and be longlisted for a job I never would have considered.
Yeah.
And it was, after a while in reflection, really interesting job. I didn't get anywhere with it, but it was still, I wouldn't have considered it.
Yes.
So be prepared to have a plan B and a C and a D, and they can be within the sort of the sector, or they can be outside. Don't discount it. Sometimes, remember I spoke about the sort of the strength of weak connections.
Yes.
Those weak connections may open other doors that you wouldn't have even considered. An element of the market or the sector that you never knew existed.
Yes.
And you can then suddenly find something out there, and you go, "Cool, isn't that brilliant?" So, don't be fixated by one thing, one sector. Be prepared to be broad about it. You will be surprised what you actually find.
Yeah. And that kind of brings us now, I suppose, kind of towards almost the end of our conversation, or at least the end of or more to present day of where you're at now. Because one of the things when we had a Teams chat before doing this episode, and one of the things that you said to me that really stuck with me, it's stuck in my head ever since, was that you may not have found a job yet per se, but what all of these experiences and all of this time, you've found a passion and something that you're now actively pursuing. And I think that, to me, kind of really hit the mark of why what you've written is really important, why it's a story that I think needs to be shared, because actually the more I'm working on this podcast, the more conversations I have, even just watching resettlement secondhand through my husband, I'm more and more convinced that resettlement, it doesn't even end when you get that first job. This is a process
Absolutely.
of years. You're kind of refinding yourself, and you're finding the civilian self within you. And that doesn't even if you'd landed one of those first jobs, where you're at now with a passion and being able to pursue a passion, that's something very, very special.
Yes, you're absolutely right. And I didn't realise I had a plan B.
Yeah.
Which is, I did all these interviews, and during that period of time, I was going, well, there must, there was a little niggling thing. Must have a plan B. What happens?
Sure.
And I thought, well, what can I do? Because I thought I had a fairly broad sort of idea of what I could do in a job. And whilst all this thing was happening, we had visitors from my time overseas. And I suddenly found I really enjoyed showing visitors, my friends, Scotland. And it started way before the June date that I wrote this, that I realised how much I enjoyed it. And I did a little bit of research, goes back to research, used my networks, and found that there is a market for tour guides. And I thought, okay, that's interesting. The military part of me said, well, actually, if I'm going to do that, I better get trained. Mm-hmm. Can't just do it willy-nilly.
Yeah.
So I found a course, and in September last year, or August, September last year, I enrolled with the UHI, the University of Highlands and Islands, on a year-long course on Highland heritage. Found an organisation that does accreditation for tour guides in the north of Scotland, and that is a period of training over about 6 months, but weekends and like. I then realised I wanted to start my own company, because I wasn't going to have someone else do this.
Yeah.
This is my idea. So I'm now doing 3 things which I really enjoy. We spoke about coming down on the train. Mm-hmm. I obviously prepared for this interview.
Yep.
I then sat down and said, okay, I was doing some work on marketing and branding, and then doing some elements of the Jacobite rebellion. Isn't that, and suddenly I thought, I've got what else to do. But interestingly, it didn't stop me from looking for other jobs.
Yes.
But I wasn't fixated by it, because I knew I had plan B.
Yeah.
And actually plan B now is plan A.
Yeah.
And if someone wants to give me, sort of phones me up and said, would you like to come and do some work? Well, only if I can go and do, only if I can do what I want to do at the moment.
Absolutely.
So it is interesting how it has changed. That the B has become the A, and if someone does offer me a job, it will be depending on what it is.
Sure.
But it means that I am, if you do an interview, will I be? I will do the same research. I will do all the same work. I will still be a little nervous, but because of what I've written, which was for me, and because of what I've got now, which is Plan A, I won't take it as seriously if I don't get the job.
Yeah.
So, if that's the only piece of advice I could give someone, have more than one plan, have more than two plans, and be prepared to develop them.
But also, what I take from your story is that having a plan A and a plan B, your plan B that's now become your plan A, these things take time.
Oh yeah.
And we hear it very often, people who perhaps do jump into a first job offer very quickly because there's almost a sense of panic. I need to have a job, which, now I caveat this with everyone's personal circumstances are different, and some people are are maybe in different stages of life, and they really need they've got mortgage to pay and all this sort of stuff. So I'm not suggesting that people wait years and years and years to find that job that's going to make them feel all sparkly and fluffy, but finding more than just a job out of your resettlement period, finding a new why, a new almost like a North Star as to I can see how excited this makes you. That takes time.
It does, and you're absolutely right. And as you were talking, I was thinking, what happened if I had said, I would have started the course a year earlier than I did.
Yeah.
I hadn't gone through all of this.
Yes.
Would I be as focused and passionate about what I want to go and do? Probably not.
No.
Because you need to go through a sort of a period of time where you understand yourself a wee bit as you've come out of the military, and all of those interviews with all those various folks from all those different sectors has given me, because of the research, an insight into those sectors.
Yeah.
So I use that quite a lot as the basis of some of the work that I'm doing now. Talking about the way local government works, the way the NHS works.
Yeah.
And I use that within my own today. So none of it was at the time. You might think it was so, but in reflection, none of it was wasted time. It all added up. It all made you a better candidate as you went for the next interview, and all contributed to that development of your plan A or your plan B.
I love how that rounds off, and it's actually such a positive message that you have. And it's funny because on first glance, this might have seemed like almost quite a negative topic to touch upon, which is a tricky thing to get that balance right. But actually, the way we've gone through this and the way it comes full circle and where you're at now, that it's so immensely positive. And I do think these 12 lessons and the 3 sections that you've come up with are extremely insightful. I think they will help, as we've mentioned. When you're going through the process, you have to constantly work on yourself. That's very, very important, and no one should ever walk away just entirely going, it was all their fault. But I think being able to kind of break down different factors, there's so much to finding a job. A lot of it is out of your control. There's things you can control, there's things you can't. There's things that you can influence, there's things you can't. There's lessons you can learn, there's things you have to just kind of walk away from. And I think for so many people who are either just beginning resettlement, but I think in particular also some of our veterans that have been out for a little bit longer, this, just hearing someone else say it is going to really, really help.
And if someone is going through the process that I was going through in sort of June last year, and reads this or listens to this podcast and goes, yeah, I can relate to 12, 6, 3, 1 of those points, and I'm not alone, and it will get better. Good.
Yeah.
It's done more than this was written for me.
Yeah.
And if I can share that with somebody else, one person goes, yeah, I can take something from that and I can learn from it, and don't do the things that I did, or do that extra bit of research, make that extra phone call or LinkedIn piece, because that then provides you with a nugget of information. Do it. And something that I wrote that was deeply personal for me and it's used by somebody else, I think is just wonderful.
Yeah. Well, listen, thank you so much. I've loved this conversation from start to finish, and I know that everyone listening at home is going to love it as well. We will link alongside this episode the file, the document of Antony's 12 lessons, if you would like to read it, if you want to pin it up on your fridge as a little bit of motivation for your next interview. I would highly suggest that everyone does go and do that and take a little look in your own time and reflect on what we've spoken about here today. Thank you so much for listening, wherever you are listening or watching this podcast. If you have any specific questions for Antony, anything that's kind of been thrown up by this conversation, please drop a comment below. And wherever you are listening or watching, we will be paying attention to the comments, and we can always pass anything on to Antony. I know that you'll be more than willing to tackle any questions that people may have. Also, if you are just beginning your resettlement journey, please come and sign up with us at the OAS Scotland. We would love to hear from you and get you started on your resettlement journey. Remember, we are a service for life, however, so if you are well into resettlement and you just want to come along to one of our fabulous events for a bit of a chat, then please, we would love to welcome you. Have a look on our website and see where we are next. So, from Combat Boots to Business Suits, that was Antony McCord. Thank you so much for your time today.
Thanks for having me.
And we will see you at our next episode. Bye.